Yeah. Yeah, so we saw
Test.
I do, sir. Yeah. Just It's sad. Last time I was in that area, I got Yeah, I'll read it.
How far I'm sticking my head out here. All things are possible with an act of the will. Okay, so thank you all for being here. And as you all should know and do know, this is a workshop, so there will be no votes tonight. And this workshop is at the request of the commissioners within their right to request such a meeting of the delegation, gathering of the delegation, shall we say. And it's within my authority to respond to that request, which I have been, and I appreciate such a large turnout. I'm going to turn it over to George in just a moment, but I do want the new members of the delegation, that is to say, the first term people, to understand that, and I think it's important for everybody to remind us that the delegation did vote unanimously to proceed with the development of a new nursing home plan in the previous delegation, previous term. And while that's not, in my view, a binding vote, nevertheless, I think it's something we all should all be mindful of, that the delegation did recognize the need for a new nursing home. And so I'm very mindful of the fact that we have an obligation, whether it's a legal obligation or not, we have an obligation to pursue this matter until it is resolved. And so with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Commission Chairman Blair. So thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the delegation. The county commissioners have requested this workshop session with you folks. And basically because we would have brought some of this information to the building committee. The last building committee meeting, the information that was being shared at the time, they felt it necessary to share it with the entire delegation. And as a result of that, and as a result of the action that was taken by the delegation last month, we asked Jonathan Hawley to bring in all the technical advisors that we had. We've heard a lot of information. The county commissioners have listened to what my good friends on the other side of the aisle have said. As you all know, we're in received a letter from them that they're willing to, at some point, going to forward to the commission what they would like to see occur in this process. I think it's important before we get that letter is to hear from all the experts that the county has hired and be able to answer any technical questions you folks have. And so, just to let you know, everybody's here tonight on their own dime. I'm not paying them to be here.
Now you tell me.
Okay? You guys are gonna get paid, but they're not. So I'm gonna turn this over to Jonathan Hall. He's got about a 15 to 20-minute presentation. He's gonna be introducing some folks. And hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we'll be able to answer any questions, any technical questions any member of the delegation has. We're not asking you to vote on anything. We're just gonna share with you as much information as we have today. Okay, everybody get that? Okay, Jonathan, I'll follow from Washington.
Thank you, George. Good evening, everybody. What I did is I prepared some statements here just so that I could just be succinct and not, rattle off the cuff. So I just want to start by thanking George for allowing myself and our team to address you here tonight. We are here on our own nickel. We have been stopped in terms of work. All of the commissioners, I believe it's fair to say, felt it appropriate that I respond. If I can actually read this. As a lot has been said, some exaggerations, some misunderstandings, and some things entirely unfair and personal. So I'm here tonight, along with my colleagues, that I will introduce, and we're all here of our own fruition, looking to make this project go forward. I'm hopeful that the time together here this evening is productive, informative, and that we both learn something from each other. With me tonight, all of whom are part of the design team except for one. I've asked Keith McVeigh to be our guest. He is the president of Bonapage and Stone. They were the contractor for the Carroll County Nursing Home in 2009. From Harvey, I first want to start by introducing my partner, Jonathan Smith. He's the technical side of our office and is much smarter than me. With Harvey Construction, I'm sorry to say, Rob Prunier, the executive VP, and James Brennan were called off to something else, but Keith Kelly, the director of pre-construction and who has been involved with this project from day one and has been providing estimating for the project as part of the design team. I think the thing that I want to stress here is Harvey has not been hired as the construction manager to build this. They're part of the design team to provide us guidance in the design to stay within a budget that we've established. I also want to mention that they were the construction manager for the Merrimack County Nursing Home in 2006, and they are the construction manager for the addition and renovation of Sullivan County that is ongoing presently. Naomi Brawl is the lead civil engineer with the Novus Group. She's here. She is directly responsible for all of the site design, the survey, the permitting, for both the Eric Drive and the Hyder sites. So she has involvement from day one. James Hasselbeck is the COO of Revision Energy is here. He's going to speak a little later to any questions raised regarding the viability of solar and the solar that was proposed as part of the Eric Drive proposal. Elijah Daniels represents the building engineers with DuBois King. Elijah can speak to both the geothermal options, natural gas, and questions raised about the possibility of methane from the waste management farm that is next door. Frank Miller, unfortunately, didn't make it tonight. He is the geologist and the geotech that did all of the geotechnical studies for both the Hyder and Eric Drive sites. He had a procedure this morning that left him unable to walk. But he did send me a copy of a letter stating that the Eric Drive site is a viable construction site and is typical of soils found throughout Dover, and has absolutely no concerns for the project or a project moving forward in that location. And finally, as I mentioned, our guest Keith McVeigh from Bonapage and Stone, who built Carroll County, will speak a little to the cost to build a facility in 2009, the market then, the market now, and what that same building would cost if he were to build it today. I want to thank Keith for agreeing to be here tonight. This is a bit of a stretch or a request by me to come out and spend his time for something that he has nothing to gain. So what I'm suggesting, if the delegation allows, I have a 10 or 15-minute presentation, a series of boards that I'll flip through. And once complete, we can entertain questions and answers, and you can direct those questions directly to my colleagues that have the expertise to answer them. I'm not handing out any of this information as a pamphlet here tonight. I do have the commitment to the commissioners that everything you see tonight will be sent to the delegation digitally before the end of the week, so that you have copies of it as the week progresses. So if we're okay to run through the materials I have at this time, I'll just keep going. If there's any questions, I can answer them now. In terms of process.
I think you want to just make your presentation, then we'll open up the questions.
Okay, so I want to start by addressing several questions or comments that came up during the last couple of delegation meetings and the public information meetings. First, the Warren Street team responded to an RFQ with a qualification package and a proposal to that original request for a feasibility study and a visioning process in April of 2022. We interviewed for that project along with several other firms being considered, and we were selected as the firm with the most relevant qualifications for the project, and a work order agreement for $60,000 was signed on June 3rd, 2022. We completed that work in the early fall of 22 with the intent of that study. It was not a due diligence of the entire Hyder site. It was to visualize a complex, a project on that property to move forward to a conversation with the delegation. It's my understanding that an RFQ was then issued in the fall, to which we responded. We provided a proposal for a specific scope of work for a nursing home, interviewed for the project along with others, and were notified that we were selected subject to the delegation's agreement to move forward with the project. That delegation voted to approve the AE fees and a contract for that design. I have a signed contract for the work that I've undertaken. On December 7th, 2022, shortly after the corresponding delegation meeting, which AE services were approved to go forward, we received that signed contract to deliver design and construction documents for a project on the Hyder site over a 24-month timeline at a cost of AE fees of $6.5 million. That agreement was vetted by county council, and I have a copy of that agreement with me tonight if anybody's interested in looking at it. In the preceding early months of early 2023, we started due diligence for the Hyder site. We completed the geotech survey. We did the wetlands delineation on that property, and we did a physical survey of the Hyder site. It was at that time we had a verbal clarification from Cindy Balsius, who is here tonight from Stony Ridge Environmental. She did the mapping, that she was concerned with the amount of wetlands, wet soils that she was delineating on that Hyder property. And because this parcel flows to the Cochico River, there would be an ominous approval process that would have to be undertaken with the Army Corps of Engineers. This being February, March, and because of the snow, we had to wait until April for her to complete that wetland survey. And then we had to get the surveyors on site to actually document the survey, to document the flags on a survey document. It was suggested that the wetland impact represented at that time a minimum $8,000 mitigation payment into the state wetland fund. And a review with the Army Corps, 800,000, did I say? I wish it was 8,000. It was an $800,000 payment, and actually Cindy just informed us earlier tonight that she recalculated it with the new numbers, and it's over $950,000 based on that 3.5 acre impact of the Hyder site. The other issue here is that because the wetlands drain to the Cochico River, the Army Corps has jurisdiction. So in order to make that application to the Army Corps, we would have to complete the design and complete all of the civil engineering documents, the actual engineering construction documents, and submit that to the state. At that time, the Corps of Engineers would accept that application and determine whether or not how to go forward. And it was suggested that it could extend that permitting 12 to 18 months after that point in time. So just to be cumulative here, so that you understand, we would have to assume an $800,000 payment to the wetland fund, incur $400,000 worth of civil engineering for the project to document those plans, along with designing the building so that we knew that the site matched the schematic plans for the building, and then sit and wait 12 to 18 months for the Army Corps to get back to us with their interpretation of the impact. It was decided at that time amongst the commissioners that the risk at that point, that we should, by all standards, look at, is there another appropriate site on the county farm property that would forego these hurdles? We signed an agreement with Cindy, it was an additional work order. We asked Cindy to flag the entire wetlands on the 280 acres of the entire county farm. We hired Bartlett Survey to actually do a boundary survey and pick up those flags so that we could delineate the wetlands on the county farm property on a site plan that we could determine if there was another site that was more advantageous to move forward with. The Eric Drive site was selected as the largest open area for development with the least amount of potential wetland impacts. The Eric Drive site is considerably smaller than the Hyder site, but the concept was developed that met the programming needs for a new nursing home, and it was presented to the delegation in November. We had 2 meetings with the building committee during this time. Perhaps there should have been more, but I don't recall any question or concerns that were raised in those meetings that at any time we were headed in the wrong direction. I want everyone to understand that our contract was to develop the Hyder concept design and not start scratch for a new building design on a different site. But in the interest of moving this forward, we absorbed that additional effort at no additional cost to the county. We facilitated the additional consultant efforts at time, as time was always an issue with the potential ARPA funding. In November of 2023, an issue of expenditure of certain funds, those ARPA funds, was discussed in order to meet the ARPA award. And we identified that we needed to start site work as early as June 24 in order to adequately meet the expenditure deadlines. So we expedited the civil engineering. I started yelling at Naomi. And that effort was with a goal of completing the civil engineering actually about this date today, the end of January. We were, so the end of January, civil engineering for that site design, the current design on the Eric Drive site was proposed to go to AOT end of January 2024, just about now. That would have included wetland permits in the DOT driveway to secure a viable site for potential construction start in June of 2024. As discussed, the building design would continue, it would follow. Completion of the building design would be the late fall of 24. So it was suggested that we have a 2-part agreement with the yet to be selected construction manager for the project. Naomi, here tonight to answer any questions regarding the permitting process and the hurdles that we faced. But I want you all to understand the timeline implications that we had to meet in order to secure that ARPA funding. Specific to the questions of cost incurred to date, on December 21st, I was asked to stop all work and to bill the county for cost incurred through 12/20/21 of 23. Project viability and the path forward was in question. So as of this date, I am telling you that we have incurred $1,975,718, which represents 30% of our fee. We are approximately 40% complete in terms of the design effort. So I want you to understand that our contract, which started almost 13 months ago, was to have design complete by the end of 24. This contract would have been billed in full with the additional $4.5 million by the end of this year. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I'd like to ask if you just hold them at this moment as I go through these boards. First, I have in these two racks over here, and I'm not gonna go through them, I have all of the proposed designs, building plans, elevation perspectives that we've all seen, that we've talked through. I want, so that you know they're there, as the discussions continue and we can refer to them. There were a couple of questions that were raised in the last couple of meetings around room design, and some numbers that were bantered around that were not entirely correct. The Strafford County plan calls for a room that is 179 square feet in size with a bathroom of 66 square feet. So the total single resident room is 245 square feet. I have that plan here and I can show that to you a little later. That meets all of the 2022 FGI guidelines for a single resident room. For comparison, in 2022, we renovated Rockingham's Fernald and Blaisdell wings on the 3rd floor of that building. Those rooms ranged from 281 to 327 square feet. In 2021, we designed the Sullivan County renovation. Those rooms are 365 square feet for a single and 491 square feet for a shared 2-bedroom room. In 2009, Carroll County was built. I have not been able to verify the size of those rooms, but Dee is here tonight. She may know that offhand. And in 2006, clearly a different time, Merrimack County, which we also did, had single rooms at 231 square feet and shared 2-bedroom rooms at 375 square feet. So I would suggest that the current proposal of 245 square feet, which meets the current 2022 FGI requirements for DHHS licensing, is efficient and not exorbitant. With regards to solar, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of misrepresentation in terms of solar not being green, solar being costly, solar having a long return on investment. I've had lengthy conversations with Revision, who was part of the design team here. And there is a road forward with a hybrid. It's called a PPA. James Hasselbeck is here. He's the COO of Revision. He can talk more to that, but there is a potential way of eliminating the cost of a solar buyout from the project, installing that system and reaping some savings from those panels as the project moves forward without any cost at this time. Regarding overall cost, we reached out to 2 major publications. I'm gonna go off script here for a little bit and just share with you. I just want to give a little context. This is a project, this was Rockingham County, this is the 3rd and 4th floor renovations of Fernald and Blaisdell and the cafeteria on the 1st floor. We bid that in 2017 at $12.5 million. Run forward 2025 with inflation, that's 18.1 million or $275 a square foot. So I would concede that we're not going to build a new building under $300 a square foot. If it cost me $275 a square foot to renovate the inside of an existing building. At Rockingham, I shared with you earlier, these are the rooms, these were existing 2-bedroom rooms. You can see what they look like. They run basically 325 square feet, a single and a double. Give a little context, this is Sullivan County. I will tell you that this building, for lack of a more technical description, is a metal building. It's an addition to the existing, and it's built like a metal building. There's nothing extravagant here. It has a foyer space, a 2-story space in the front, and these are the resident rooms below. Excuse me. Again, being an existing facility, that existing facility had many hurdles, including a 10-foot floor to floor that we had to match. So there is no headroom between the acoustical ceiling and the bottom of the truss. So the entire ventilating and HVAC system is a vertical stack system, feeding all of the rooms on all 4 floors. Being that it's existing, we were allowed at that point some private, semi-private rooms. Again, because it's a renovation. With the proposal of a new home, it is highly recommended in the FGI guidelines that you go to single resident rooms. Again, in terms of what we're proposing, a single room at Sullivan was $299, a shared room was $425, plus about 70 square feet of bathroom space. At Sullivan, we tore down half the building. We renovated the purple and we added this green space 4 stories on. We did that in 2023. Harvey was the low bidder. The construction manager selected was $68.4 million. If you push that forward to 2025, the square foot cost goes from $438 to $482 today. In 2004 and 2006, Warren Street designed Merrimack County Nursing Home. The palace on top of the hill, the foyer atrium space, if you will, the congregate dining room that you all love at Carroll County, and shared bedrooms on that floor. Again, in 2006, FGI allowed for that. That is no longer an allowance in the guidelines. Again, square footages, semi-private room was close to 400 square feet. A semi-private room with bathroom is close to 2 1/4. An image, Merrimack County, which is a similar construction type to what we had proposed for the Eric Drive site building, was bid in 2006. Harvey was the construction manager at $44.9 million. If you escalate those numbers to 2025 numbers, you're at $80 million. That goes from a cost in 2006 of about just shy of $200 a square foot, and today, $356. My point in showing this is that the construction type that we've proposed is cheaper, was cheaper 3 years before Carroll County was built. And I'm going to show you those numbers. This is a little out of order, but I'll just share with you because it's here. This is actually the resident room of Strafford that was proposed. You will see that the requirements for all of the approaches and the clearances for all of the bed and the chairs and all of the rest equate to a room at 179 square feet plus a 66 square foot bathroom. Total of 245 square feet. We took a look at, and Keith was kind enough to share the floor plan for Carroll County. These are my numbers. I have a letter to share that I will read to you from Keith, but these are my numbers. In 2009, I bid for just $19.7 million. It's 86,000 square feet. It was roughly 229 square feet at that time. If you move that forward to 2025 numbers, it's $54 million. Today's cost is over 600. You're in the 620s. I'm going to share with you a letter and read a letter from
John, you're saying Carroll County model was built today would be $600, $625.
exactly, yes.
Mr. Chairman, is there a representative here from Carroll County that can tell their side? From the Carroll County construction, because what they're doing is they're trying to discredit everything
No, there
somebody
is.
else may
No, I'm
say.
not, actually.
That's not appropriate.
Sir, I'm not. I'm actually supporting it. And I'm going to show you. Here. So I'm just trying to tell you that there programmatically, there's more square footage in this plan, but I'm just telling you, I'm not trying to discredit anything. I brought Keith McVeigh here to share with you what, those are his analysis of what that would cost today. So in terms of understanding costs, We reached out to Construction Summary of New Hampshire and Maine, who supplied us with about a dozen projects since 2016 with some cost. And we analyzed them going forward and equating to them what they would be to today's cost. Those range from $260 a square foot to over $1,200 a square foot. Two publications that we reached out to was B&I General Construction Data and US Means, both of which put numbers together on a national basis based on project type. They, in 2023, the low number was $435 a square foot, and Means was $476 a square foot. So I'm just proposing to you that the Strafford County schematic budget that was prepared by Harvey in November was $480 a square foot. It falls right in line between what national publications are telling those square footage should be. I have a proposal further down, if we get to that point, where I think I can reduce that cost to under $450 a square foot. So, there's a couple of other people here I just want to mention, I don't want to forget. Keith Kelly is here from Harvey. He has been doing the estimate for the Strafford County proposal since we started. He actually priced the Hyder proposal as well, so I'm going to allow him to speak to cost as those questions come up. There was a question raised by one of the county residents about the geology and the findings in the geotech report. I mentioned earlier that Frank Miller was not able to attend, but I do have a letter here that I'm willing to share with everybody that speaks to the viability of the site from a geotech standpoint. Cindy Balsius with Stony Ridge is here. She did all of the wetland mapping. She can speak to wetlands. She can speak to the soils mapping. She can speak to the wildlife survey that needed to be completed. She did that all personally. And she also has a very diverse understanding of the Army Corps requirements, should the possibility or the desire be to go back to the Hyder site. So as I mentioned, Elijah Daniels is here from Du Bois King. He can speak to the geothermal question that's been raised. That is not part of the basis of our price. He can also speak to the issue raised about the methane that comes off the waste management farm and the viability or non-viability of incorporating that into our project. And as I said earlier, if the delegation is open to hearing it, I do have a reduced scope project for the Eric Drive site that we have developed on our own. But I think I want to open the floor to questions and see how the conversation progresses. I want to thank you all for allowing us to speak here tonight. And at this point, I'll take questions and allow my colleagues up here to answer them as they come up.
But there's a couple of things I want to ask if I can, by there. Just a couple of questions. I've been to Carroll County Nursing Home multiple times. I think it's a beautiful nursing home. Is it possible to build Carroll County Nursing Home similar to that? Now, I understand there's a lot of parts that go on with this, but the Carroll we can't do today because of new regulations they have in terms of room size and so on and so forth. But the 2.5 story concept, I had asked you to look at that, and I hadn't seen this till tonight. So I know that Len had mentioned to me that he was interested in seeing us do something with Carroll County. He liked the looks of it. He did throw a number of people. I won't share that with you because it doesn't mean anything because it's not accurate. But we did ask Bonnet Page and Stone, who built that building, to come here. The president of that company, who built the building, to come here to share with you the information regarding Carroll County. Just so you will know. So John, why don't you, first of all, show them how Carroll County complex would fit on the present site that we have. And then I'd like to hear from Keith from Bonnet Page and Stone about his take.
So this diagram right here,
Excuse me, before you continue on, Sally, I just have a question for you. Did either the county commissioners or administrative Bauer forward you the letter from the Republican caucus of January 9th?
No. We do not.
Okay, I will forward that to you tomorrow morning, because, I gotta be really honest, what's going on here is really a waste of everybody's time. Until this caucus, the Republican caucus, gets our expectations to the county commissioners, which we promised to have to them by early February. Everything that's going on here is a waste of time, in my opinion. I will send you this copy. I guess we probably should have sent this to you to begin with. We assumed it would be forwarded, but I would advise you to read it once I send it to you in the morning.
so do you want me to continue?
That,
Do you want me to
It's not,
continue?
first of all, it's not just
you
me.
can do whatever you want.
Okay, so I'm just gonna explain
The
that.
Board of County Commissioners requested this meeting. I want the members of the delegation to hear from the president of Water Page and Stone regarding the construction of a Carroll County model. It's a 2.5-story model. It's what all you guys told me when we were in Carroll County that you wanted to see. You said you liked it. So I took the words, your words, which were basically that you liked it, and I went to Warren Street and I said, they like the Carroll County design. At least they told me that to my face. So I wanted to see what Carroll County, with the Carroll County design or a similar design of Carroll County. I'm not saying this, we're gonna do that. Just saying, I wanted to see if it would fit on the site, number one. And number two, what it would cost. They're real simple questions. The man who built the building's here, so I think you ought to hear it. You know, that's why we brought him, and he's on his own dime. So let's, so I'd like to hear from him.
Keith, if you could come up, I'm just gonna just briefly explain what this diagram is. This is the same site plan, with the current Strafford County proposal as the underlay. I took the plan from Merrimack County Nursing Home, which was done in 2006, that has roughly 109 units on a floor. That would get us to roughly, we need to be 215 beds. So that's a 2-story concept on one floor. All of the utility space would need to be in a basement, just to give you some understanding of how that design would superimpose over the design that's already been done. The green building here, Carroll County is 1/2 of this footprint. So I don't know what I don't know, but I just took it and mirrored it. The current design is 54 units on a floor, so if I double it, it's 108. 2 floors puts me at roughly 219. It gives me essentially what we're looking for 215 beds. There are some things, and I'll let Keith speak to, that are not in the plan. There's a heating plant that was existing that would have to be incorporated. And there's some other issues, but Keith, I'll let you go.
Thanks, John. Good evening. So Carroll County is approximately 86,000 square feet. We had built that in 2009. We were the construction manager, much like you've got Harvey here. We were running at that time, like that age, I can't see close or far. We were running $229 a square foot all in for that. And Jonathan had talked about a heating plant. With that heating plant, they had a biomass plant on site, so we did not need a heating system in that building. We did from there are things, it's hard to compare buildings, but at the time it was a fairly expensive construction. There are a lot of porticos, a lot of detail in that building that is not necessarily figured into that. It is in the square foot cost, but not in, it increases the square foot number, but doesn't add square footage, if you will. That's in the area of porticos, covered walkways, items like that. It did have a full kitchen. There was talk about that, and in fact with elevator service from it. So it had all of those items in there. So what we did in this process to get ready for this meeting was we ran out of projection from 2009, which by the way was an extremely wonderful time to bid construction projects. Economy was down, folks wanted to build buildings, and we were fortunate enough to have that project. So we had a lot of input from subcontractors who worked really well at the time. The project went very well, finished on time, and we were able to return savings at the end. Now, through that process, part of that was everyone was happy to be working at the time. It wasn't a manpower shortage. Everyone was on a common goal to deliver the project. So it went well, plenty of help. And part of that efficiency was we brought $2 million back. So when we ran this number, I ran it both ways. Ran it with the original contract and then ran it with the $2 million savings. And that range, and I don't love doing projections like this, because my estimator in me likes to give you exact numbers, but that range comes between 627 from the original contract and goes to 561 square foot with the final contract amount. Now, this doesn't represent a full estimate effort on this project, but it does give you a range of costs for where you land. I was very relieved when Jonathan talked about liens and like that. Those are good comparisons and with these other projects. So I know we're in the range here. And then Jonathan talked about getting the number down. So when you're talking square footage tonight for your own building, having done this my whole life so far, there's a lot of opportunity to save dollars, and Harvey has done a ton of that like we have. And there'll be areas to save throughout the process. That's where that savings comes in. And I think, I hope we're through the worst of this with increased costs and like that, because we did not need that 2020 through 2022 area of increase. But in that range with that 527, I think that could be a hair high. Again, I didn't do a full estimating effort, but it's not out of line compared to all the other buildings.
Does anybody have any questions for Keith?
Yes, sir.
I just want to know one thing. Can Carroll County be a mirror of Carroll County be built in? Does it meet the present requirements of GMS? You know that?
I would think it doesn't at this point, knowing that there's been changes, but I'm a builder, not a designer. That's probably more Jonathan's area.
There's a question, yeah.
Thank you for coming out.
So,
Thanks a lot for coming out and giving us the information. So you gave us square footage, I understand that, and maybe I missed it in this, but if that building back in the time when it was built was 20 million, I'm just gonna use round figures later, what would the building be today?
I projected out to 2025. And again, it's 86,000 square feet. I landed at 54 million.
More than double.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely, thank you.
And some examples of that, mechanical systems. This one had a very limited mechanical system in that we owned a heating plant for it already. But right down to doors, frames and hardware, that when we built that job, you could have a hollow metal frame and a door and hardware for it for $1,000. That's over 2,000 now. So that it's not as if every discipline doubled. There are areas in there where it's tripled, and there's areas where there hasn't been that much swing in number.
Thank you.
Go ahead, David.
You're on.
Hello, okay, I understand there was one built in Hudson. About half the size, I think. The Carroll County one. Do you happen to know what that came at? Because I think it just got done, didn't it?
I'm sorry, I don't know about that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was done. Tennessee. Upset.
What is the name of it? You know what
I don't know. But the administrator told me up to Carroll County, there was one down. I'm pretty sure he said Hudson. about half the size what they did up there, that was just coming off, just came online.
I believe that was a Tennessee firm that did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Al. You should use the microphone.
Be thankful they're working.
Sorry about that. So I'm Al Holland, I'm from Strafford 20, I'm a new representative in a new district. And, you know, as your timeline,
Closer, we're not here.
as your timeline kind of shows, like the new people came in kind of midstream in this project. And I've been trying to catch up on how a nursing home, county nursing home works. And then also as you've dealt with like the permitting and site plans, the shifts that came in, so it's been kind of a challenge to keep up with it. But we had like 2 public hearings, and a significant part of the public hearing, the concern that came up, obviously cost came up, but the other one was actually design, so it's perfect time to ask this. So that 5-story one we looked at overview was kind of a hub and spoke design that had the central piece and then those long corridors. And I think there was some concern along that we at least heard public comments, concern about it, that design, you know, was kind of isolating, and that the long corridors really, with mobility issues, weren't so great. And so again, that, my question is, and so they were like, that's where I think Carroll County came up, not just the cost, but the actual design of the home itself. And so did you address those concerns?
So the hub and spoke design that we talked about is this. So I can tell you that, I'm very familiar with the concept of Carroll County, and it was actually implemented in Merrimack, which was done 3 years earlier, where you have 12 to 13 rooms that basically surround a community space, where it might be the dining room, their activity space, and control of nursing. But in conversations here at Strafford, what we looked at, we were given the mandate to actually look at the design, actually to put this design on a site that is half that of Hyder, and to look at the efficiencies of how we might better staff it, if you will. So, well, we had a lot of conversation around that 13 unit, if you will, that sits around common space. Now, clearly, and Dee Brown is here, and she can speak to Carroll County. She was the administrator there for the last 2.5 years. 13 people come out for breakfast, 13 people come out for lunch, and 13 people come out for dinner at the end of the day. When they're done dinner, they go back to their rooms. And Dee will, you know, she confirmed this with me today, that you might have 2 or 3 people that are more communicative, more engaged in their community. So that space that is conceivably supposed to be vibrant with a lot of going on, has 1 or 2 people sitting at a table by themselves. In the conversation here in this design with Strafford County staff, we looked at staffing where basically the floors are broken up into units of 24. So you have a floor with 48 beds. The hub and spoke is that there's a controlling nurse station, and that's all that it is. The requirement for FGI guidelines is that they have some visual connection to the door to the resident's room. None of the projects, Merrimack, Sullivan, all of those existing components that prior design, Strafford or Carroll including, they don't meet that requirement that is of today. We have a nurse station that is the control station. That doesn't mean that it's reduced to 1 nurse. There's a staffing level that is required by licensing that is going to be there regardless. For that particular floor. But we have an LNA station mid-length of every hallway where the LNAs that are responsible for 3 and 4 residents are doing their charting, and they're doing everything and not walking more than 20 feet.
They spend most of their day in that wing where they're dealing with people that stay in their rooms. But to the point of vibrancy, this space in the middle, which has glass at all of the intersections here, is and two clear stories that run the full length of the building. What we've done here is we're trying to implement something called biophilic design, where we bring the outside in. The problem with introducing landscape in a nursing home is every plant is toxic to some degree. If you eat a bushel of maple leaves, you're gonna get sick, you know? So we can't have something that people can touch and get a rash. We can't have a berry that somebody can pick. But if we're in an enclosed, clear story that has glass where there's a green wall and the perception is that it's outdoor space, this space becomes, with windows and that greenery that's running from floor to floor, and there's an openness and then there's natural light, there's heating out here for the entire floor. We also have, it was deemed by staff here, the decision was to have a separate dining room where everybody comes to a dining room, that we don't feed them in that community space. So at breakfast, if somebody wants to be playing cards or they're doing something else, it's not tear it up, put it up, set it out, take it down, move it. We looked at the vibrancy here. So if you say 48 people, and if 80% stay in their beds, you still have 20 people out here. You know, there's vibrancy in that communal space. There was a lot of thought to that. And I don't think people understand what this space was because we never got to a point of actually presenting to you interior elevations and perspectives. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess I can ask my question now. I was waiting for either Chairman McGlair or Chairman Smith. I know both the Eric Drive and Hyder House concept, a number of things were included, which are perhaps not necessarily part of the minimum for the basic nursing home concept. At Carroll County, you actually managed to get the cost down because the heating plant use it from another facility. And I know this one, I don't think this is appropriate, but somewhere to tell you put things in there like the stores or the community, a meeting space, which people from outside the nursing home presumably use, the daycare center, all of which I think are good ideas, but they do raise the upfront costs. I'm wondering about the Carroll counties. The Carroll County strictly just the basic nursing home functions minus the heating plant, or there are also some outside ancillary functions that are done in that building.
Do you want to respond? Because you have an infinite knowledge of the county. I don't.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? I'm Dee Brown. I actually spent 11 years here as an intern under Ray. Worked for him for 11 years, got my nursing home administrator's license and headed out to Carroll for the last 2.5 years. And in the last 5-6 months, I returned back to Strafford County, working with Ray once again. So speaking about Carroll County is an absolutely beautiful facility. It is very pleasing on the eyes and has every component that most people would look at and say that it's what you would want. Working on the inside of it, sometimes it has a little bit of a different presentation. If I'm not mistaken either, Keith, there was no laundry services either in that building.
Right.
So that was another area that didn't have to be built, and they were actually going to build that on, and at the last moment or whatever, decided not to build that component along with the heating system. So, as far as the thing, I think the biggest and most important thing is that we can't build Carroll County because of the line of sights. If you look at that and the way it's laid out nowadays, you can't run your facility off of a surveillance camera. You have to have a direct line of sight for all the rooms that are in your area, and that the nurses have.
So take your fucking box and shove it in your box.
Thank you. Well, anything else?
I have no idea.
So I think those are some of the things we'll have to look at and see how it can be. You look at the nursing station. I remember I went with several of them on the board there. And if you see where the nurse's station is, you have no line of sight for any of your residents. So they rely on a camera and watch it from that point. And I think those are some of the things that are gonna be the challenging part of it.
Can you speak to the, sort of the ancillary spaces that the representative was talking about?
Yeah.
We talked about having, what I was calling, you know, the market square,
The great room, the Mount Washington Valley room is the great room when you enter in. That is basically a space that's used predominantly for, resident events, maybe Christmas, meal, Thanksgiving meal, 3 times a week, it's bingo, and it can be used for other things along that line, staff, like it is, that's where the staff would eat. As far as it being used predominantly for the residents, it doesn't have that day-to-day use. It's a large space, and it's usually reserved for just like the big events. That kind of is a downfall because you lose a great deal of office space and other type spaces in the process. But it can easily be, you know, redesigned, but that's what the way it's set up now. As far as anything else, I think if you know Carroll County's working towards renovating the old nursing home to have those other spaces that they can then use for outside services and groups and activities and such. But the nursing home itself does not provide spacing for anything other than the residents. And, you know, they have typical accessories such as a hair salon and some meeting spaces, doctor's office, things like that.
does that answer your question?
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Yes, Lauren first and then Jesse.
Thank you. I'm curious because we had a lot of debate about services and different types of services. What are the services? So aside from the physical bedroom with a bed and a bathroom and a window, and 245 feet. Aside from that, what are the things that are essential that have to be in a nursing facility versus the things that some people might have considered frivolous, right?
Well, what we're proposing here are resident rooms that have actually the shower that, a bathroom that is the shower. So everybody has their own personal spaces, but FGI requires that there be a bathing suite, you know, a tub suite, on each floor. There are requirements for linen closets, clean, dirty, red tag. There are requirements for nursing stations, LNA stations. There are, John, help me out.
Solar utility, housekeeping,
But I can't hear you.
solar utility rooms, housekeeping, activity spaces, dining rooms. They actually have FGI has a, usually, what is it, number per resident, or square footage per resident, floor for each of these spaces throughout the floor.
Yeah, there's physical therapy environments, you have to have occupational therapy environment, you have to have.
No, actually, those are all dependent upon the facility,
Right.
whether you offer those. So if they're not offered here, then the home has to have some sort of operational plan where they outsource that or they bring it in.
Let's say with skilled beds.
Exactly. Again, it depends on what kind of bed it is.
Yeah, I have a question for Dee. Since you didn't have laundry service facility there, how does the cost compare to, running your own laundry here at the Strafford County as opposed to hire contractors that does laundry?
No, actually, what they had to do is that the laundry services are in the old nursing home. So when they built the new nursing home, they didn't bring them over. So the laundry services will go next door, and do the laundry there and then bring it back. So it's still in the old building.
Well, okay,
I have a few more things to.
I have one point that was briefly referenced, but I'd like to explore it a little bit more. And that is, the question of monitoring activities and having people in sight so you don't have bad things happening and nobody sees it. And the question became whether you are observing them with your own physical eyes or you're doing it per surveillance system with cameras and so forth. And the statement that was made in my presence was that when you have a camera observing somebody and somebody looking at a screen, then you don't really have a functionality because nobody's watching the screen. Am I misstating it, or can somebody speak to that? In other words, you gotta have actual eyes looking at actual people, not eyes looking at screens, because nobody watches the screens is what I'm told.
So my understanding with camera systems is that came into play with licensing, addressing existing facilities that had physical plants that just didn't allow, for anything other than that. In a new facility, you're not allowed camera systems to meet that requirement. That's my understanding of the SBI guidelines. Dave, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if I may say one thing, the point of cameras is to see something that happened. It's already happened. If you have a line of sight and the vision in a nursing home to see the rooms, you're seeing things as anticipated and may happen, or if someone's unsafe, and you can see that ahead of time. The use of cameras is really to review after the fact. And if having it eyes and line of sight is you're hopefully able to prevent some of those things from occurring.
Thank you. Al,
I have another question. So like, you reference like Carroll County a lot.
can you use the mic so because they're.
All right, I mean, you reference Carroll County a lot, and I think when it came up with the square footage of Carroll County was like 86,000 square feet roughly that was thrown out there.
Yeah.
And so like, I think they had about half, because this was used, it came up during like our delegation meeting. So if you roughly double the size of that, that would put me at about 172,000 square feet. The proposed plan is $301,000, or excuse me, 301,000 square feet, which is a pretty significant difference. So, and again, at $500 a square foot, that adds something like $72 million to the project. So that comes down to, is there, I know all space is essential, but is there ability to trim the square footage?
So on our own, we've managed to bring that square footage down to 285,000 square feet. I do have a proposal that I can show, in terms of reducing the square footage and some things that we could do to bring the price down. But before the night expires here it's only a little after 7. I did drag Cindy out of Wolfboro to from Stony Ridge to talk about wetlands and the site, and I would like to give her the opportunity to talk about the farm. So there are issues with the farm. There are issues with wetlands throughout the farm. There are permitting issues, and there are some overlapping easement issues that would need to be addressed if the Eric Drive site were abandoned and you were to go someplace else. So Cindy, do you dare come up here?
Thank you. My name is Cindy Balsius, and as Jonathan said, I am a wetland scientist and a soil scientist. And I was retained to do a lot of the field work on the potential sites for the nursing home. And it had started originally with the site on the County Cross Farm Road. Yeah. And we went out there and we delineated the wetlands, and I did note to Jonathan, I had concerns because it was quite wet. And by the time we were finished and the survey picked up the flags, you could see all the wetlands, but then the big test came with starting to put a footprint on the plan and to look at what wetland impacts there might be. Preliminarily, we did do up a draft, and the wetland impact, without doing the final grading, was close to 3 acres of impact. And this is where I can talk a lot, is the permitting process. So this process was taking place last January in 2023. And at that point, and it still is for the most part, but at that point, we deal with 2 major entities when we do wetland permitting, and that is the state of New Hampshire DES Wetlands Bureau, and through the state programmatic general permit, the Army Corps of Engineers, the federal arm, which also includes the EPA, US Fish and Wildlife. So when we looked at that preliminary plan and saw that there were 3 acres of wetlands, Jonathan was yelling about time constraints and getting things done. A 1 to 3 acre impact in the state of New Hampshire has the possibility of going to what we call an individual permit process. And that process can take as long as 1 to 2 years. But before that process actually even begins, there are numerous meetings and negotiations that take place. These days, we also have, that's a recent elevation on projects the last couple of years, is we also deal now directly with New Hampshire Fish and Game. And as part of that process, they run through the Natural Heritage Bureau a scan that picks up within a certain radius all your endangered species or threatened species. And when you get those hits, that's what we call them, because it's kind of like a bullseye. We have to look at those species in context of the project and where it's located. And we have to deal with those with New Hampshire Fish and Game. Now, on the outside, that doesn't sound like a complicated process, but thanks to some legislation the past 2 years, they now have mitigation, and that mitigation is not defined. And I think we can tell you just in recent dealings with Rockingham, it took almost 9 months to negotiate something for a species that was not a wetland dependent species. Here we have wetland dependent species. So on that site, we have 6 hits, 5 or 6 hits for endangered species. Now, because of its close proximity to the Cocheco River, that also complicates things. At that point in time, they're looking at significant nexus. Do those species use the Cocheco River? Where are they going? Are they traveling onto the site, using the wetlands on site? All those things have to be considered. And then to top it off, we still have to go through the state permitting process. And for the state of New Hampshire, this would be a major wetland impact. And because there's over 10,000 square feet of impact, we also have to deal with mitigation. Now, during that process, the Corps of Engineers actually lowered their threshold for mitigation to 5,000 square feet last year. So now we have 2 concurrent entities between the feds and the state with different mitigation amounts. This is why I love this. And so we continue to look at it, and I ran some preliminary numbers for mitigation. And last year, that number came out to roughly $840,000. The in lieu fee calculator was just updated with the increased land values late in December, and we're now at $950,000 for that mitigation. But before we get there, we have so many other hurdles, and some of them I just explained that we had to go through. Timing was an issue, and that's when I said, you know, you may want to look at other properties you have. Because one of the things that we have to do when we get over an acre of proposed wetland impact is called an alternatives analysis. And usually, they call it an off-site alternatives analysis, but look, in this case, the county owns a lot of land. My argument will be, why are we even looking to purchase land somewhere else to do the county nursing home on the county property that was more or less set aside for the public good? So we still would have to do that alternatives analysis. We would have to look at the entire farm and the wetlands and the properties available to do that development. We would need to be able to explain, in this case, why we need to impact 3 acres of wetland on this site when the site we're actually looking at currently is under 5,000 square feet of impact. And there's no mitigation involved. So those are kind of some of the things that we've done and reviewed and gone through. And any questions, please stop me as I'm talking, please. How does the recent court decision on waters of the US impact anything on this project? Currently, the Army Corps of Engineers in the state of New Hampshire are doing what we call now jurisdictional determinations, where they will go out and they will determine if they will take jurisdiction on the wetlands that you delineated on the site. That process takes roughly 6 months right now. Once they have that process down, you then have to go into negotiation and look at the impacts. And mitigation might be a little different for the Army Corps at that point versus the state of New Hampshire. But here's the part that's interesting. The state of New Hampshire has not changed. All of that wetland will have to be mitigated for. So it's really not the Army Corps of Engineers that's a limiting player in this process anymore. It's actually the state of New Hampshire. To boot, out of all the New England states, and actually today made me double check and research this a bit more with regard to that recent court decision. Other states like Connecticut, and I do believe Maine and Massachusetts, the Corps has begun to change the process using the new definitions as the court had suggested or made them do. And the state of New Hampshire is one of many states that have actually sued the government with regard to their definition of waters of the states. And they're going back to the Rapanos decision. So at this point, the Corps really can't do anything because it's tied up in court to even go to the new decision that decrease some of the wetlands that we normally call wetlands. So it's interesting, and any applicant right now really gets caught up in that whole circular thing. But at this point, all of that being said, it doesn't matter. The state still takes jurisdiction. We still have to do all that mitigation. We still have to go through and do an alternatives analysis. We still have to deal with New Hampshire Fish and Game. That's why we started looking at other sites. We're gonna have to do an alternatives analysis anyway, so we have to know the amount of wetlands and uplands for that process. And when we finish looking at everything and looking at the easements and which easements would allow for the conservation easements to come out for use for the county, this lot that is currently being looked at made sense. And the wetland impacts made sense. That kind of permitting would take maybe 2-3 months tops. Any questions?
Is this a clay? Does this have a lot of clay in it?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a typical Dover marine sediments.
Correct.
Everywhere.
Which would be very costly, because you have to have a lot of gravel.
So I leave that to the structural geotech engineer and the architect for that kind of thing. I map the soils, I look at the wetlands, I know it's.
Right, Dave.
Thank you. Well, that brings me back to, maybe the county should own some other property that maybe with a nice gravel base on it, like, up in Farmington, it's quite a bit up there.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of gravel.
Huh?
A lot of gravel.
Would that be good stuff to build on? There won't be much relegation there. And you can probably buy it for less than $1 million, maybe and a half back.
I'm just, I flag it, analyze it and look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Is gravel good? And you're talking about a lot of gravel. Is that something good in terms of being a potential site or is that?
Well, I can speak that I think gravel's better than wetlands and clay soils. That's in general. I'm not an engineer who doesn't design.
Kelly?
So I just wanted to know if, after that 3 days of rain that we got, which was, or maybe it was 4 days of rain, where Hampton got flooded and stuff, did anybody go out and look at the site on Eric Drive? Because I did. Did you guys go out, and look at the site?
No.
Okay, so it was pretty much underwater, so we would never be able to build on the site and have all of these entities in that basement, because we'd be in the same situation that we're in now with the flooding that we just spent. How much, Commissioner, on? How much did you guys just spend on the flooding?
I think it's 90-something.
Well, yeah, that was a structural problem that was built.
Okay, how much?
What was it, $90,000? Altogether, it's probably $200,000.
Okay, $200,000.
What the insurance paid.
Yeah, sure, okay, good. Thanks.
No, listen to me, I have a marina. My marina was underwater during the last two floods, so I can talk specifically about what happened with the Cachico River, okay? Eric Drive site was not underwater, okay? Just wasn't. Back portions of the Cachico River rose, the freshwater side, but on the tidal side, the tide rose 3.7 feet. There was a surge, we had celestial tide, that's the reason why, and we had a southeast wind during the low pressure system that forced, we had like a perfect storm situation, but a celestial tide, and you had the southeast circular pattern of the low pressure system to settle over the Wayland. That's what drove the tides. Third highest tide we've had in history, in recorded history. Not soon to repeat itself, hopefully. But it was done because it was a celestial tide. It lasted a whole week. Normally tides of that nature, they call spring tides, they only usually last 1 to 2 days. This one lasted a whole week because of the celestial climate.
Was any of our land out underwater?
No.
Just had bad drainage in some places.
Right, now, one of the point about drainage, I think this is fascinating, you don't know this story. When they built this building, they must have brought in 200 tractor trailer truckloads of gravel to build this building. The contractor who built the building wanted to replace the covered bridge. We had a covered bridge over here. All you old residents of Strafford County remember that. We had a covered bridge down on County Farm Road, burnt, right? We had some inmates burnt out. The contractor wanted to replace that bridge to get to the sand pits that were over the rocks have now. They wanted to build a brand new bridge, iron bridge, where the covered bridge was, because it was gonna be cheaper for them to construct the bridge than it would to bring the gravel out around 10 miles, 15 miles, they had to travel to get the gravel here. Just, okay, so they were willing to build a bridge for nothing. Everybody, they went to the city of Dover at the time, the city of Dover said, no, we gotta save this bridge. But they probably should have done is pick the bridge up and set it aside as a museum piece, but they didn't do that. They said, no, it drove the cost of this building up as a result of it, and the cost of Riverside on building C, okay? They had to bring in a ton of gravel for that. I was here when they did that. And as a result of that, I mean, a few years later, they built the bridge burnt down. They lost the bridge anyway. So there was over 200 tractor trailers of gravel brought into this site just to build this, just to let you know. And it's true of all throughout the projects in Dover. I was chairman of the city's planning board for 10 years. And mayor for 2 terms, I worked with many developers in Dover. We all have the same problem. It's solvable through drainage, foundation drains and.
So George, if I may, there's a letter that question was raised about the geotech. I just want to read this. In summary, our test borings indicate natural occurring subsurface soil conditions are present from the ground surface at all locations explored in the project area. The subgrade bearing layers for the building foundation and pavements consist of hard clay, dense glacial hill soils, and bedrock. The subsurface profile encountered at the test boring location is consistent with the soil conditions typically found locally in Dover and the greater Seacoast region. In our opinion, these subsurface layers are suitable for supporting conventional reinforced concrete spread footing foundations and concrete floor slabs for the building and should provide a suitable subgrade for driveways in surface parking areas. Furthermore, the Eric Drive site is considered a buildable property from a geotechnical engineering standard. I just want to offer that. I also want to explain as, just so that you all know, during our due diligence in the spring of 2023, when the issue of the wetlands and the Hyder site came up, doing our due diligence, it was uncovered and brought to our attention that there are easements on the entire county farm. And they're in two categories. They're a special conservation easement, which the deed clearly says that the county has the ability to lift that easement if they want to use it for county business. And then there is a regular conservation easement that is held by the New Hampshire Society for the Protection of the Hampshire Forests. These green areas are the ones that are the special easement, which are easily lifted, which includes the Eric Drive site. The Hyder site on the other side is half special and half permanent easement. So the idea, all of these purple sites, we are going to encounter a difficulty in negotiations with the holder of those easements to see if they're lifted. And I'm told that there will be some resistance to allowing those easements to be lifted. All the more reason why we came to the Eric site.
Question, Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
You showed us the, Carroll County one spread out, so that I assume takes more space, right?
It does.
And if so, how much space would that take? How much would that?
Well,
To develop?
all I did, because I don't know what I don't know, I just doubled the footprint.
Yeah,
So it's 54 units on the floor now, one side,
yeah.
I just mirrored it. That would give us 109 units on the floor. We would have 2 floors, it would be 218 beds. We're licensed for 215 here.
But would it fit on that Eric site?
It would fit. Oh, that's a question for Naomi. I mean, the reality here is, we have to provide a fire lane around, we have to provide a certain number of parking spaces.
Right.
And you can see that I have literally, the building extends into the parking areas all the way around the building. And there are components of this footprint that I just don't know. I mean, there is no heating plant, there is no laundry, there is no utility spaces. So there's some square footage that needs to be added to that. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but it's a very tight squeeze.
One other question, when, the plan that you brought to us, how much land are you using for that, developing for that, you know, parking lot, fire road, all that? How much?
He's talking about 5,000 square feet. He's talking about this.
The first one.
This one.
Yeah, that's right.
This.
Right. Yeah, so actually, better is this. This is the current plan. The blue is wetland. The pink is the 50-foot buffer that I can grade in, but I can't build a physical structure in. You're gonna see that parking lot, edge, driveway, we are right up to the wetland. I mean, it's shoehorned into the site.
How many acres?
Good evening, I'm Naomi Kroll with Novus Group, the civil engineer. So I guess that somebody might ask this question today, so I actually did a calc, and the available area between the wetland on Eric Drive, excluding the buffer, just edge of wetland to edge of wetland, is 13.8 acres. In contrast, on the previous site that we were looking at, it was 11.2 acres from edge of wet to edge of wet. And there would still be a pocket of disturbance in the center of that. So you can see from this plan that we are using almost all of that available area that we have. And the only wetland impact that we have is actually at the driveway entrance, and it's a very minor.
So you said 13.8,
13.8.
and then you said something about 11 something.
So that was on the previous site that we looked at, that had more wetland on it.
Yeah, no, I mean this one, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Naomi?
I have one. Good. So one of the questions that's been under discussion over the time period that we've been looking at this is that the original site and the original plan was the commissioner's preference because it allowed them to have a lower, wider structure, which would permit them to have a kind of circular concept where senior citizens who like to walk, especially some people with some mental problems, shall we say, they like to walk and walk and walk and walk. If they are in a circle, they can just keep walking, right? So that was one of the reasons for the preferential attitude towards a lower, wider structure. When that site was initially rejected for some of the reasons that you've discussed and have been mentioned here, and we went to the Eric Drive site, then that design, that low, wide design was no longer described as possible. Therefore, you had to go narrower and higher. Well, if you do now, you've got a lot of structural steel and the building becomes more expensive from that point of view. But also, you don't have the walkability aspect. Now you got situations where the walking paths come to a wall. And I'm told that senior citizens in this category, they don't know what to do when they get to a wall. They don't know where to go instead of just keeping on going in a circle. So now, when it seemed like the Army Corps of Engineers issue was going away, and we would be able to have the initial site available and have the lower, wider structure, that seemed to be more in the direction of what had been the preferred design from the beginning. So where are we now, given some new recognitions and some new thoughts about the design? I'd appreciate some talk on that. So.
Unfortunately, I don't think I can speak to that.
Okay.
Well, I will share with you that.
Then you may be seated.
I will share with you that on the second floor, which was to be the memory floor, if you will, there was the accommodation made here that there is a loop walkway that occurs in the back of this component. There are still dead-end corridors to each of the wings, but there is a circular track for the primary that time during the day when people are up and walking. That, you know, that we tried to take into account with this design. I'm not saying it's perfect. I truly like the previous design, but fitting that footprint on this parcel of land just became very difficult to accommodate. And when we were weighing in conversation of all of the opportunities, I know that when we finally came to Ray with this concept, and he took a look at it, and I think Dee can speak to this, the staffing ratios and the savings that could occur from a staffing standpoint here. Not saying that we're reducing staff, but how staff is being used, this became very attractive. So on the memory floor, the second floor, there is a raceway, if you will, that does occur at the center of space that addresses this that component. And that could be implemented on all of them. That could be carried up. We just didn't do that. There is a hallway. We did talk about, we added near October, we added a fifth elevator in the back so that there was direct access from all of the units in the back to the secured courtyard in the back. So nobody had to go through, like, you're not walking through the restricted first floor to get to that space. That elevator allowed all of the floors access to that secured area in the back.
Anybody else has some questions at the moment? Okay.
No question.
there anything else you want to add, Jonathan, at this point?
Does anybody want to talk about, I mean, I know there was questions, concerns raised around the methane produced at waste management.
Yeah, I think we had a touch on that, because that was.
We're here, let's talk about every question that everybody has. I don't wanna have to come back, so because we forgot to talk about chapter 2.
So I'm Elijah Daniels. I work for Dubois and King. I'm an electrical project manager for the group. My expertise is definitely not mechanical systems, but I consulted our mechanical engineers over the weekend. It was brought to my attention Friday, so I scrambled this over the weekend. And the discussion we had was paying a premium. Essentially, landfill gas is usually about a 50% quality methane versus natural gas, which is well above that in the 90s range. And we weren't ready to add a premium price to the project. Usually, these premiums are paid for lead qualifications, to find alternate energy sources, things like that. It's we were trying to keep our mechanical and electrical systems as cheap as possible. With the future, knowing that we had availability of our natural gas here, we do have, I believe they said 20,000 cubic feet an hour is what we've been granted by the utility company for natural gas access, which equates to about 20 million BTUs. And we only need about a quarter of that. So back to the landfill gas. Landfill gas isn't a primary fuel source. It's not, it could be supplementary, and we can look into that, surely. But my understanding and our understanding is that the gas goes directly to UNH, and we believe, we've been informed that most of that pipeline is owned by UNH. So it's not a simple just tie into an existing gas structure, gas line and feed from it. It would be a either pipe back to the facility or permitting or whatever agreements with UNH to gain access to theirs. And it's also our understanding that UNH requires their fuel first because of this, the way they're purchasing this. So they have, they're the primary user of this fuel source. So I don't, we don't believe it's a viable fuel source, with the, knowing that we have access to natural gas. I mean, for us, I live in Vermont, and I wished I had access to natural gas at the prices that you guys have natural gas access. Versus oil, it's ridiculous in price, and it's much more efficient, it's cleaner burning fuel, and we were actually pretty excited about the opportunity to focus on natural gas and not worry about bringing in oil or any other type of fossil fuel.
Speaking of redundancy.
So redundancy as well. So that's part of that primary fuel source. We do have the availability. Again, natural gas is the primary fuel source. We can stay with just natural gas. Electrically, we have natural gas is a utility source, which allows us, we don't need to have a redundant source of fuel for power generation, because this facility would need power generation for emergency services. So that's also something that we took into account. We don't have to have diesel on site and natural gas, or propane on site and diesel on site. We can stay with one utility source of fuel and a utility source of power. And that covered our requirements for the emergency services.
So if methane wasn't actually, would we have provided that source?
So if it was strictly the landfill gas, again, it's methane at a lower, dirtier concentration versus natural gas, which is a higher concentration. We would still need, if we had just that source, because there is it's a limited fuel source. Eventually, it's going to go away. Again, that could be argued with the natural gas, but we would be required to have multiple fuels. We would still have to have natural gas as our backup source of fuel on landfill. And the premiums on the natural gas would be scrubbing, cleaning the fuel, making it a higher concentration of methane so that we could burn it cleaner in some of the equipment that we, you know, our boilers or generators. So then there's less maintenance on that end. So we would have to, you know, it gets scrubbed once, they clean the water out of it. And then it goes to a secondary cleaning, scrubbing, and then it goes to a third system, which then brings it into the natural gas percentage, methane percentage. So it's fairly expensive. Yes.
Oh, Jessica.
I'm sorry.
No, Jessica.
Sorry.
And getting it here from that landfill, we have to cross the Chico River. Also, I imagine that would open up a lot of permitting problems.
Absolutely. We've had, Naomi and I actually had a conversation about permitting and gas companies, and I would assume that if that's the direction that it comes across the river, I would assume that there would be major implications on how to cross the river from the.
One of the things, before Tim, to your question, we had Ray Bauer call the university regarding their demand for methane, because I thought it was a great idea if we could tie those lines somehow and save money not only on a new nursing home, but our present operation, which uses a lot of natural gas. So Ray, did you just share that information?
Yeah, they told us that with the investment that they made in piping the methane from the site to UNH, that they had an exclusive agreement with Waste Management until such time as all of their needs for fuel was satisfied. And it's my understanding it's still not satisfied. So there'd still be no methane available today for us.
I do know that UNH also, they co-generate, which is, they burn the fuel for heat and electricity. The heat is is a secondary byproduct of creating electricity. So they have endless amounts of electrical and heating needs there. And right now there's my understanding from reading literature from UNH on this project, they're already searching for other sources of green energy because they have, they've made the commitment to hit certain benchmarks until the year 2100 to be completely net zero and off fossil fuels. So UNH is constantly trying to grab any green energy they can to be part of their campus. So, yes.
That pretty much answers my question, which is that UNH is already using all that landfill gas, and there isn't any available. We just like arbitrarily redirect here, but also, this was like about 15 years ago. My first term wasn't that whole thing built exactly to supply UNH, and it ends at the UNH power plant. Who most of you visit the campus, the tallest building. I'll be in Strafford County, that there was a smokestack on that whole power plant, which is fueled by in large part by the landfill gas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Peter. I heard the lady in the white shirt over there talk about,
Dave, use the microphone so that
you know, I can hardly understand people.
I know you don't like it, but that the people who are watching and the recording.
She talked about pellets, I believe.
A biomass, yes. So typically biomass, so typically biomass is wood chips.
Yeah.
Byproduct wood chip.
Don't you use wood chips up there in Ospey?
The biomass plant at the Carroll County. that we were talking about. It is a pellet biomass, okay.
Well, for a backup, is that reasonable or?
This is a large facility, a large square footage, a very large BTU, need, so.
It's double what they.
Yeah, more than, yeah. And that was a concern for us. And again, you know, not to continue to take the easy way out, but natural gas was, I mean, the most efficient way for you to fuel that. So we without direction to go to a biomass look, typically we don't, unless again, you're looking for LEED credits or you're looking for some sort of, you know, like we say, a plaque to congratulate you for.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've already got the pipeline in, I think it's all paid for now. And the gas is cheap now.
Yeah.
But I was wondering about, I thought you were talking about secondary or.
Secondary, yes, biomass could be a secondary source of heat, if that's what you're asking, to the fuel source. So with natural gas, we don't need a second source of fuel because it's a utility and because they have this, we have power and again, I'm talking electrically specifically, but because we have power and we have natural gas for emergency purposes, we can run the facility on generators.
Okay.
Or we can run it on electricity. Now, on a mechanical side, we did, after our meeting, we started down the path of designing this system with the backup will be geothermal. Knowing that the geothermal credits are still around until 2025 and the amount of money that can be saved, you know, on the construction side of things for the geothermal system, we have, you know, when we ended our design, when we stopped, we were designing it for the backups, you know, to have a backup system or a supplemental geothermal 60% system.
But even with the credits, et cetera, wouldn't that still be pretty high because of the capital cost upfront?
Yes, it's still a premium for the geothermal system. That was never included in.
No, it was not. The premium to go to, just for the wells was basically $5 million.
For the amount of wells that we needed drilled. It's a very large mechanical system. Yes, this facility would require a lot of air.
Yes, sir.
Peter.
So what's the time to break even on investment with the geothermal?
So we presented on that, and I believe we were in the 10-year range, 10 to 12-year range on the geothermal payback on a 60% system. So essentially, the 60% of the building full load would be covered by geothermal, which again, you'll never have 100% load of a building. The building's always gonna ebb and flow with the seasons. So typically, you know, sizing it for 100% is ludicrous. It's required, but it's ludicrous. We'll never meet those, maybe 2 days a year. So we sized at a 60% load, knowing that 60% load would be a very good line for us to match the credits with the capital cost and the payback. So we had looked at 3 different options with no geothermal, 60% geothermal, and 100% geothermal. And I think the 100% geothermal system, you know, the payback was over 30 years, where you start to look at system degradation at that point, replacing systems. So there was never really a true return on investment for a system, 100% system.
I do have James Hasselbeck who's the COO of Revision is here. I know there were some questions raised about solar and viability of solar. He's here, he's made the opportunity to come. I just want to give him the opportunity to speak to those issues.
Good evening. Energy, right? Yeah, my name is James Hasselbeck. I've been designing, installing, and maintaining solar arrays in the state of New Hampshire since 2006. Probably more than anybody else else in the state, CO provision energy. An important thing to think about when we talk about projects like this is that buildings use energy, right? And there's multiple different energy sources. We talked about gas, we talked about methane, we talked about geothermal. We also talked about electricity. This building will require electricity to operate, regardless of its size, the final design, and the final location. So what we need to be thinking about is what are the most cost-effective sources of electricity to allow this building to operate? New Hampshire, as you all know, has the 5th highest cost of electricity in the state, in the country right now. That's been consistent, which is the most expensive electricity prices in the country. And solar energy provides an opportunity to own and operate and generate your own electricity. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but think about this as you have to pay someone for electricity. You can own and generate that yourself with solar, or there are other people who will own that solar and sell it to the county at a discounted rate for your local utility.
So I want to be clear that in the previous proposals, the $170 million estimate back in November, I carried 1.1 million.
Johnson, use the microphone.
I carried $1.1 million in soft costs for the solar, as a solar allowance. We had talked with Revision about putting solar on the roof of this building, and they estimated that that would be the cost. We don't, at that time, we didn't have mechanical HVAC loads. We didn't know what the electrical load would be, so it was very difficult at that point to project what an ROI would be with that investment. But I can share, and I'm gonna let James explain it a little bit more. I had a lengthy conversation with one of his colleagues, Dan Weeks, about a PPA. There is a hybrid PPA that is available to the county that would allow us to not pay for the system upfront, install the entire system, and begin to reap the rewards of some payback day one, with the possibility of buying the system in 5 years or not buying it and just maintaining it out through. So I'm gonna let James talk to that.
Absolutely. A power purchase agreement is a very common financial structure for larger scale solar energy installations across the country. Because solar is such a reliable and cost-effective investment, major financial institutions see the value in this and will own and operate a solar array for the county to avoid upfront capital cost investments. So how this works is the county would enter a contract to purchase the electricity generated by the solar array at an agreed upon price, which is lower than your utility rates. Then that third party owner would then pay 100% of the design, construction, and maintenance costs to operate that array and effectively sell only the kilowatt hours generated by the solar array to the county instead of purchasing it from other sources they currently do. The city of Dover is actually very familiar with this approach and has on their high school a large scale solar array that's owned by a third party that is actively saving taxpayers money today and has for, I think, 4 or 5 years. Sorry?
There's no net metering, correct?
That is correct. Yeah,
If we could net meter, we'd probably save more money, correct?
that is also correct.
Thank you.
But you have to purchase.
You have to
You do not have to.
You don't have.
But the savings from a net metered array would be greater, and the savings would then flow down to the purchaser at a higher percentage than they would without net metering. The money works in either model, but certainly more effectively with net metering.
Thank you very much for that.
There was a question that came up. I don't know who asked it, I'm trying to remember, but it doesn't make any difference. There was a question regarding, what happens with, solar panels after their useful life? How do they get recycled? So on, so what is their useful life?
Yeah, so typical solar panel has a warranted lifespan of 25 years. Average useful lifespan is right around 40 years. And the oldest array in the North Shore that I'm familiar with is in Beverly High School and was just replaced after about 45 years. It's still working, just not as efficiently as the new. So what happens? What happens? Yeah, so I have the pleasure of sitting on a national board, on the board of directors of the Operations and Maintenance Cooperative. So we look at this a lot. Solar panels are easily recyclable. 75% of the solar panel is glass. The bulk of the additional materials are aluminum, silver, copper, and plastic on the back sheets, the majority of which are easily recyclable in a cost-effective way. So we currently have partners in New Hampshire, e-waste partners, which pay us as a solar contractor to recycle solar panels. Solar panels are not hazardous waste. The silicon solar panels that are used in 95% of the installations in the US and 100% of the installations here in New Hampshire and everything that we've talked about are absolutely safe. They can be put in a landfill. We think that's wasteful and dumb, but it is not hazardous.
So let me ask you another question. So
It's actually revenue stream. I want to say that one more time. There was a,
we're using about 5 megawatts an hour annually. How big of a solar array will we have to have on the county if we wanted to cover our entire operation here? Let's spend well over $1 million in electricity here. How much acreage do we need to produce 5 megawatts of power?
yeah, more than the rooftop, I think for the original building we looked at was around 400 kilowatts. So if you were looking to cover that entire load, 5 megawatts of AC, you'd be right around 7 megawatts DC. So prior to that AC conversion, that would be somewhere around 20 acres, depending on the topography.
Lori.
Thank you. I know that you worked with the Oyster River Middle School with their solar array. And part of that included putting in a solar bus port. Can you talk about how the vision might use something like that for the benefit of expanding solar power and also the efficiency of having covered parking for municipal vehicles as needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another our purchase agreement where the Oyster River School District paid $0 for the solar array in the bus port in the parking lot on the rooftop and still seeing energy savings every day. That bus port provides a couple additional advantages. They see it as reducing maintenance and plowing costs a little bit. It is important to note that is a more expensive installation. So the installed costs of that bus port is higher than what we would do in a big field or what we would do on the rooftop there. It's still penciled out, but the return on investment on a bus port is slightly lower from a pure electricity generation perspective. But depending on additional value you might see, reduced plowing, covered space for the kids as they're getting on the bus, there are additional things to consider. Did I answer your question?
So we have in our county buses that take people places that are next to the county, or is that?
We have small, we have 3, I think, 3 and now we 2. We lost the other one, right? We have 2.
Just because I know like Oyster River uses those, the covered parking during snowstorms and reduce the overhead cost for clearing buses by massive amounts. I'm assuming there are buses either for the judicial system or otherwise that could during bad weather be parked under these things to save the cost of clearing that as well.
We do have a number of sheriff's department vehicles. We have a lot of vehicles in the sheriff's department. We have probably 8 or 10 vehicles for other county operations. So if we were gonna put a carport on somewhere, like they do with the bus port, I suppose that's certainly an option. The reason why I asked about how many acres we needed, with 5 megawatts, number one, that's what the state right now caps us out at, 5 megawatt by room correctly.
Correct.
And that's just about how much we're using, probably around 4.2 or 3, somewhere in that range, it slightly varies. But I wanted to know that because of the 20-acre question. If we were gonna go to solar at some point and have some kind of agreement, we need to set aside 20 acres for it. You would necessarily have to have a solar array on the nursing home itself. We could create a solar array here on 20 acres and then fund the entire complex of it.
That's exactly correct. And what's nice about a solar array on the ground is not only can be oriented perfectly, right, to maximize its production, it is easier to build on certain soils. So I was listening intently to the wetlands conversation here. A lot of areas without a poor drainage or not good for building buildings are actually excellent uses for building solar arrays.
James, can you speak to Buckingham?
Yeah, we are doing something very similar with Rockingham County, right down the road in Brentwood with this project team. And in that case, the county chose to purchase the array, which is another option. And due to the cost of electricity, the electricity savings that they're gonna get there, and some attractive, federal incentives, they'll be getting electricity to power that new facility at a significantly cheaper rate than they would from the utility otherwise.
What type of payback do they have? Is there an analysis on that?
I am the builder of the thing, so I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I know it's public record and it's out there, I just can't speak to it. So I can tell you all the geeky technical specs, so. Are there any questions about end of life?
Kelly,
So I just had a question. Okay, so I just had a question about, so are the panels that you're talking about, the crystalline silicon photovoltaic?
Correct.
Okay, so. So this, I'm in environment and agriculture and then I was in science and tech today and somebody else was talking about this. And so I had pulled up this article. So more than 90% right now, all those PV panels rely on that crystalline silicone and have a lifespan, of course, as you know, about 25 to 30 years. So forecasts right now suggest that 8 million metric tons of these panels will have reached their end of life working lives by 2030. So that's a tally that's projected to reach 80 million. This is from the National Energy study in 2020. But today's technologies for recycling these units are inefficient and rarely deployed. That is an enormous problem. PV panels contain toxic materials like lead that can cause environmental pollution, yet many are dumped in landfills when they die. They also contain valuable materials that could be reused to make new solar cells, but today these resources are mostly wasted. In the US, there are no federal regulations to mandate PV recycling, and according to the US National Renewable Energy Laboratory, less than 10% of the country's decommissioned panels are recycled. Even in the European Union, where legislation requires PV recycling, many waste facilities merely harvest bulk materials like aluminum frames and glass covers, which make up over 80% of the silicon panel's mass. The remaining mass is often incinerated, even though it contains elements like silver, copper, and silicon, which together account for 2/3 of the monetary value of a silicon panel's materials. Companies and researchers are now racing to prepare for the looming tsunami of PV waste. They are developing technologies that promise to recover far more of the useful materials from cells while reducing the cost and environmental impacts of recycling. So I just.
Thank you for making a wonderful case for the recycling of solar panels.
Yeah, but you're saying that it's this easy process or not.
What year was that
Okay.
article?
What they already said, there's a tsunami that's coming and that people aren't doing it, less than 10%.
What year?
They're hitting our landfills.
What year was that article written?
2023.
So, and the useful lifespan they're talking about, the tsunami that you referred to was how far from today?
It's in 2030.
No. It was 25 to 30 years is the text that you read. I've had the opportunity to work with the National Renewable Laboratory on this exact issue, and what
Yeah, I'll
they're
send it
saying
to you.
is great. And what they're saying is that there's a fantastic economic drive. Right there, you said 80% of the materials are currently being recycled today, and that 20% that's not has the most financial value. That's a fantastic free market indicator to drive entrepreneurs like my e-waste recycler in the state of New Hampshire who sees financial value and pays us for these things today, and that will only continue to grow in the future.
No, I said less than 10% of them are.
Being recycled today,
Correct.
10% of panels, right?
Correct, that's
But we're
right.
talking about the end of life, which is not today. That's 25, 30, 40 years from now. About, I think it was in 2022, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services actually testified against a bill which was concerned about solar panels ending up in landfills. They said it was not a concern.
Well, if we want to discuss the environmental impacts of solar panels, I think that it's fair that we discuss the environmental impacts of natural gas. So the Office of U.S. Energy Information, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, posted an article, that stated that natural gas exploration, drilling, and production affects the environment. When geologists explore for natural gas deposits on land, they may disturb vegetation and soil with their view. Drilling a natural gas well on land may require clearing and leveling an area around the well site. Well drilling activities produce air pollutions that may disturb people, wildlife, and water resources. Laying pipelines that transport natural gas from wells usually requires clearing land to bury the pipe. Natural gas production can also produce large volumes of contaminated water. This water requires proper handling, storage, and treatment so that it does not pollute land and other waters. Natural gas wells and pipelines often have engines to run equipment and compressors which produce air pollutants and noise. I understand that UNH is using natural gas that is produced from the waste management system, but we need to consider the effects of burning the natural gas and what it has on the greenhouse gas effect. Thank you.
We have a lot of expert people here that are sitting and listening, and I'm sure they're intrigued, but could we make better use of their presence by asking them questions? I'm sure we have some information that we have not yet derived from their availability. So if we don't have questions, maybe they can volunteer information that we haven't asked them about yet.
So, Billy, the only one that hasn't spoken to Jane is, Keith. Keith is here from Harvey. I do have a proposal. I don't know if you want me to head down that road.
I'll do something.
Okay.
It's getting late. I just wanted to make sure everybody gets an opportunity.
Yeah, so Keith, I mean, I don't know if you want to speak briefly about market trends today, you know, where you see this. I mean, I can say, well, I'm blue in the face, what the construction costs are that we're proposing. Keith has the experience of building many buildings around town, around the state, has some understanding of construction costs.
Good evening. Keep this short and sweet. My name is Keith Kelly. My role at Harvey is Director of Pre-Construction and Planning, responsible for projects that Harvey forms construction management, construction services for managing the before construction happens, all the stuff we're talking about tonight. I'll echo what Keith from DTS said earlier. The ranges in which we are indicating the construction costs for this project to be are well within what we're seeing currently in the market. The past 3 to 4 years during the pandemic have caused escalation to triple in some cases. We are seeing a 33% increase in construction costs as published by the Engineering News Record, which does periodic publications. So all of the things that Keith had mentioned from BPS about what Carroll County's projections would be for today's costs in the realms of the $450 to $620 a square foot is fair and reasonable, whether we agree with it or not. That is what the market is showing. We currently have 6 public projects that are in both design and construction that range from $420 a square foot to $698 a square foot. So just to reiterate, this is what the market is showing. This is what this building will cost based on its use, function, program, and size. And yeah, I'll take any questions relative to that.
No, okay. Is there any other questions, folks, that you have? While we have all the experts gathered here? No, it's okay. Well, I want to thank you all very much for coming. I know you came a long way. Some of you did on your own time. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that you showed up, and Keith from a lot of pages. Thank you. Both Keiths, actually. So since there's no other questions, Mr. Chairman,
I guess we'll wait to hear from our colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle in early February. And then we'll, whether we'll have a building committee meeting or,
There's a question back here.
oh, sorry.
It's not so much a question. I also want to thank all of you for coming and clarifying something that perhaps were not well understood. But before we wrap up, I would really like to say, moving forward, I hope that we can, all of us try to work together, or perhaps, a smaller subset of the nursing home subcommittee, bipartisan, try to work together on what some of our common vision is, things that we can agree upon, and that we might be able to move forward, looking into, what conceptual ideas about the nursing home we agree upon. And I know it's not our job to design the nursing home. But since we have to vote on it, and we can't seem to come up with, we should come up with a plan that we might agree upon, so that we can move forward to build a nursing home that this county really needs. I just wanted to say that before we broke up for the night.
Thank you.
So one of the opportunities that was certainly wasted, missed in any case, and that is for more of us to have seen more nursing homes. Those of us who went up and saw Carroll County, saw a beautiful facility. David, thank you for pushing that for such a long time. We finally got there. Some of us got there. But very few of us got to see Merrimack Nursing Home, and I hope that we will see some more, because the more we see, the more we learn. And at the very least, we'll have a more informed opinion, and also be able to educate the people of Strafford County more on this entire issue, remembering that when we started off building the jail, 25 years ago roughly, what we wound up with was nothing like, or a lot of difference between that and what was initially proposed. And it has been a tremendous success in terms of its operation, its design, the money that has been generated for the benefit of Strafford County taxpayers. And I think that we are learning something with regard to building a new nursing home that can also benefit the ultimate design. So I urge you to keep an open mind. Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you one moment, Tom. We'll see you on the 31st for the public hearing on the budget. Tom? Yeah.
Did I hear that the chairman said that we're gonna be attending, going to other nursing homes to see examples of way other ones are built and operate and such?
I certainly think that it would be a wise course to see more.
I commend you on that. That's what should have been done in May and June of 2022. We're in a process here where we're getting explanations tonight, a year and a half after this whole thing started, and only because it wasn't passed. The bonding wasn't passed. So it's unfortunate, but I'd say you got the right idea. This is the way for state representatives who are not experts on nursing homes should be able to attend, learn from these things. And also, the other thing that was mentioned tonight was that a budget was given and to live within that budget. We weren't privy to that budget. I can tell you right now, that wasn't something I wanted to spend. So it kept going, went up 170 million to 150, then back to 170, which maybe was going to 2 million, 200 million. You gotta look at a lot of different factors here. And I thought it's a good idea to look at, after hearing all these problems with the land here, why not build it somewhere else? What's the big deal? Unless it's that we have to have a kingdom here. You know, why not have it in another community? What's the difference? We're supposed to be doing the best thing for our constituents of Strafford County. So.
Amen.
I look forward to pursuing different ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions, remarks, and get Texas?
Just very quickly, we're, people live longer than nursing home they did in the past, Georgia still, but we are building something for people who lived a long time and maybe are the torches that wish they were, they deserve a nice place. I think we all agree they deserve a nice place to live the last months or years of their life. So we should probably err on the side of building something that's nicer than it needs to be, rather than worry too much about spending a little more than maybe we'd have to. Leave it at that.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here and see you next week.